If helping Michael Jordan cost his 8-year-old sister's life, what price would it extract? Dylan Williams, 17, had been working at the Jordan brand for just 3 weeks, earning minimum wage, the sole means of sustaining the health insurance that kept his leukemia-stricken sister, Sophia, alive. On a blustery morning, Michael Jordan slipped, scattering documents. Some papers tumbled into the storm drain. Dylan didn't hesitate. Abandoning his post, he retrieved the documents. Jordan expressed gratitude. "These papers are quite important," but the supervisor exploded, "Never interact with Michael Jordan. You're fired." Little did Dylan know he'd just become embroiled in something far grander than he could have imagined. 2 hours later, Sophia collapsed at school. The cancer had progressed, but the dismissal, that was just the beginning, because sometimes doing the right thing can cost everything. And sometimes the person you save harbors secrets capable of altering millions of lives. What was Michael Jordan truly carrying in that briefcase? Why did a simple act of kindness trigger a relentless pursuit? And what would Dylan discover in the next 6 hours that would irrevocably alter not only his life, but his sister's forever? The relentless rain hammered against the 12th floor windows of the Jordan brand headquarters in Chicago, creating a melancholic rhythm that echoed through the elegant corporate corridors. Dylan Williams nervously adjusted the navy blue tie of his uniform, which still felt too large on his slender 17-year-old frame. His fingers trembling slightly as he reorganized the papers on the reception desk for the 3rd time that morning. The 3 weeks since he'd begun his junior assistant role had been. The morning was particularly frenetic, with executives rushing in for an important meeting on the brand's international expansion, their voices echoing through the lobby as they debated numbers and strategies that Dylan didn't fully grasp, but knew were crucial to the empire Jordan had built over decades. The young man remained focused on his tasks, organizing mail, fielding calls, and directing visitors with the quiet efficiency he had learned was essential for survival in this unforgiving corporate environment. Every movement was calculated, every word weighty, every gesture measured to avoid attracting unwanted attention from Brooks, who patrolled the floor like a predator observing its prey. The rain continued to intensify outside, transforming the Chicago streets into temporary rivers and leaving employees drenched and irritable, creating an atmosphere of tension that seemed to presage something extraordinary about to unfold. "Terrible weather to be out and about today," commented one of the secretaries, shaking her soaked umbrella. "I hope no one important needs to go out in this downpour." Then Dylan saw him, Michael Jordan, in person, walking across the parking lot towards the main entrance, his imposing 6'6.5" figure slicing through the rain as if it were a minor inconvenience. The man who had revolutionized global basketball wore a sophisticated black overcoat and carried a weighty brown leather briefcase, his movements still displaying the athletic grace that had made him famous, even at the age of 62. Dylan felt his heart quicken involuntarily, not because of the man's fame, but because of the magnetic presence emanating from him, an aura of determination and excellence that seemed to fill the space around him. Jordan walked with haste, clearly trying to escape the intensifying storm, his Italian leather shoes making dry crunching sounds against the wet marble lobby floor. The young man forced himself to look away and continue his work, remembering Brooks's stern words, but couldn't help but peripherally follow the movements of the man who embodied everything he admired about overcoming adversity and achieving success. "Stay focused, Dylan," he told himself, organizing yet another stack of unnecessary documents. "You have a job to do and a family to support." Disaster struck in a matter of seconds, as if fate had meticulously orchestrated every element to create the perfect moment of chaos. Jordan hurried and focused on shielding his briefcase from the rain pouring through the revolving doors, failed to notice the puddle that had formed on the polished marble floor, a consequence of dozens of drenched employees' passage through it over the previous hours. His right foot slipped violently, sending his body into an uncontrolled motion that seemed to unfold in slow motion before Dylan's horrified eyes. The leather briefcase exploded open in midair, scattering dozens of crucial documents in every direction. Some floated toward the leather sofas in the lobby, others slid across the wet floor, and the unfortunate few were swept away by the rushing water toward the entrance drain. Jordan managed to regain his balance at the last second, narrowly avoiding a complete fall, but the damage was done. Confidential papers swirled through the lobby like autumn leaves, some perilously close to the drainage system that would carry them into the city's sewer system. "Damn it!" Jordan exclaimed, his voice a rare blend of frustration and despair. "These documents are essential for today's meeting." Dylan didn't hesitate. All rules, all warnings, all of Brooks' threats simply vanished from his mind as he witnessed several documents being sucked into the drain. His protective instincts, the same instincts that compelled him to care for Sophia when she was ill, kicked in automatically and relentlessly. Abandoning his post behind the reception desk, he sprinted toward the entrance, his sneakers slapping against the wet floor as he dropped to his knees to intercept the documents before they disappeared into the Chicago sewer system forever. His hands moved with incredible speed, retrieving paper after paper, some already partially soaked, others just inches away from utter loss. The young man managed to save the majority, his clothes soaked and stained, but his focus laser-focused on preserving the papers, clearly of paramount importance to Jordan. Staff and visitors stopped to observe the scene, some with expressions of shock, others with silent admiration for the youth's swift action. "Here you are, Mr. Jordan," Dylan said, rising and handing over the recovered documents, his voice betraying only a slight tremor. "I managed to save practically all of them. Only a few sustained minor water damage." Michael Jordan was genuinely impressed, not only by Dylan's speed but by the young man's willingness to jeopardize his own well-being to assist a complete stranger. Jordan's eyes, renowned for their fierce competitive intensity during games, now shone with genuine gratitude as he received the documents from Dylan. The boy, drenched and soiled, nonetheless maintained a dignified and respectful posture. Jordan, more than anyone, understood the value of initiative and personal sacrifice, pillars upon which his own legend rested, and instantly recognized these qualities in the young man who had just salvaged documents containing months of crucial investigative work. The folder held evidence of financial irregularities, meticulously gathered by Jordan, information that could expose corruption within the company itself, and whose loss would have meant the end of an investigation potentially safeguarding hundreds of honest employees. The man who had faced the greatest challenges in professional sports extended a hand to Dylan, a simple gesture laden with decades of experience and wisdom. "Thank you, boy," Jordan said, his deep voice carrying genuine sincerity as he firmly grasped Dylan's hand. "These papers are very important, more so than you can imagine." But then, Daniel Brooks's thunderous voice sliced through the air like a razor, instantly transforming the atmosphere of gratitude into a tempest of fury and humiliation. The supervisor, having observed the entire scene from afar, his eyes narrowing with a rage seemingly disproportionate to the situation, as if Dylan's kindness posed a personal threat to his authority. Brooks surged toward the group gathered around Jordan and Dylan, his face flushed crimson against his graying hair, his neck veins pulsing as he prepared to unleash his accumulated frustration on the young employee who had dared to violate the company's most sacred rule. Nearby employees instinctively recoiled, recognizing the signs of an impending outburst from the man notorious for his disproportionate and cruel reactions. The lobby, moments before buzzing with admiration for Dylan's action, now transformed into an impromptu tribunal where kindness was poised to be judged and condemned by bureaucratic inflexibility. Jordan watched Brooks approach with an expression slowly morphing from gratitude to concern, recognizing the type of man he was and instinctively sensing that the situation was about to take a turn vastly different from the kindness Dylan deserved. "You broke rule number 1!" Brooks roared, his voice echoing through the lobby, causing everyone present to turn and witness the spectacle. "Never interact with Michael Jordan. You're fired!" The word "fired" struck Dylan like a punch to the gut, stealing his breath and collapsing his world in a matter of seconds. His legs felt weak as he processed the reality of what had just transpired. In a moment of genuine kindness, he had not only destroyed his own life, but possibly Sophia's as well. Brooks continued his verbal assault, accusing Dylan of leaving the cashier unprotected during the minutes he'd helped Jordan, transforming an act of compassion into criminal negligence in the eyes of any casual observer. Tears began to well in Dylan's eyes, not from self-pity, but from utter despair at the prospect of telling his mother he had lost his job, explaining to Sophia that he might no longer be able to afford her treatment, and facing the failure he had just brought upon his family. Jordan tried to intervene, his voice rising to defend the young man, but Brooks was quick to remind him that internal disciplinary matters fell outside the purview of executives, no matter how consequential. The lobby had become a battlefield where justice and cruelty waged silent war, observed by dozens of employees who dared not speak out against Brooks's authority. "Please, Mr. Brooks," Dylan managed to say, his voice cracking, but still holding a sliver of dignity. "I was only trying to help. I didn't consider the consequences." Dylan gathered his few personal belongings from his desk with trembling hands, each movement laden with humiliation and despair. As employees he had considered colleagues averted their gazes, unable to confront the injustice unfolding before them, but also too fearful of their own positions to intervene. The cardboard box Dylan carried held only a few personal items. A photograph of Sophia smiling during a successful medical consultation, a protective amulet his mother had given him on his first day of work, and some identification papers, now seemingly utterly useless. The weight of defeat settled upon his young shoulders like an unbearable burden, making him question his decision to aid Jordan, if he shouldn't have simply followed the rules and prioritized his family's safety above all else. Each step toward the exit felt like an eternity, the eyes of everyone present burning into his back, some filled with pity, others with relief that they weren't the target of Brooks' fury. The sound of his footsteps echoing through the empty lobby mingled with the relentless drumming of rain outside, as if even time conspired against him in this moment of profound desolation. "Perhaps I was overly naive," Dylan mused, clutching the box to his chest, "but I cannot regret helping someone in need." Precisely as Dylan traversed the revolving doors of the Jordan brand, leaving behind not only a job, but also all the hopes he'd placed in this opportunity to improve his family's circumstances, his phone vibrated with the frantic urgency of a true emergency. "Mom" flashed on the screen, and something about the insistent, repetitive, uninterrupted ringtones sent his heart racing even faster than it had already been pounding since his dismissal. Dylan answered with trembling hands, instinctively knowing that bad news rarely comes alone, and that the day, which had begun as another chance to prove his worth, was rapidly transforming into the worst day of his life. His mother's voice on the other end was a torrent of pure panic, the kind of despair only a mother feels when she sees her child in peril, and it pierced Dylan's heart like a sharp blade. The rain continued to batter Chicago, but now seemed less a bothersome weather phenomenon and more a perfect metaphor for the storm about to completely devastate the Williams family's life. "Dylan, Sophia fainted at school." His mother's voice trembled with abject terror, each word imbued with an urgency that stilled the world. "We're heading to the emergency hospital." Chicago's traffic seemed to conspire against Dylan as he sprinted through the rain-slicked streets toward the children's hospital, his breath forming tiny plumes of vapor in the cool evening air, his heart hammering so forcefully it felt poised to leap from his chest with each desperate stride. The cardboard box containing his personal belongings had been abandoned somewhere along the route, its contents scattered across the sodden pavement. But none of this mattered now in the face of the urgent need to reach Sophia before something terrible happened. His mother's words echoed in his mind like a haunted mantra, each syllable imbued with a pure terror he'd never heard in her voice, not even during the most trying moments of his sister's initial diagnosis. Pedestrians parted before him like a possessed man, his drenched sneakers slapping against the asphalt in wet, rhythmic thuds, his Jordan brand dress shirt clinging to his sweating, desperate body. The children's hospital loomed before him, a monument both of hope and despair, its illuminated windows contrasting with the gray sky that seemed to perfectly reflect Dylan's state of mind at this critical juncture. "Please, God, let her be okay," he murmured between ragged breaths, his legs burning with exertion. "I can lose everything, but I cannot lose my little sister." The hospital's automatic doors whispered open, revealing the sterile, familiar environment Dylan knew all too well from Sophia's 2 years of treatment, its white walls adorned with colorful children's drawings, a desperate attempt to mask the somber reality of the illnesses treated there daily. The distinctive smell of disinfectant mingled with the sweet aroma of pediatric medications, evoking memories of sleepless nights, tense consultations, and moments of renewed hope now threatened by the perfect storm descending upon his family. Dylan strode directly to the information desk, where a middle-aged receptionist, her reading glasses dangling from her neck, recognized him immediately, her eyes reflecting the automatic compassion honed over years of dealing with families in crisis. She didn't need him to say a word. She simply pointed towards the elevator and stated the floor number, knowing he knew the way better than most hospital employees. The elevator ascended slowly, each floor passing like an eternity, as Dylan struggled to control his breath and mentally prepare for whatever awaited him. Third floor, pediatric oncology ward, the receptionist's gentle voice stated, recognizing the desperation in his eyes. Your family is in examination room 312. Dylan found his mother in the pediatric oncology ward hallway, seated on one of the familiar blue plastic chairs, her trembling hands clutching a tissue already saturated with tears, her red, swollen eyes betraying hours of silent weeping she tried to conceal from her younger daughter. Carmen Williams, 42, bore the etched marks of a lifetime of battles on her face, premature wrinkles around her eyes telling tales of sleepless nights, double shifts, and constant anxieties about the children she raised alone since her husband abandoned them 5 years prior. She rose as she saw Dylan approaching, her arms instinctively reaching out to embrace her eldest son, and for a moment they remained there. Two shipwrecked souls clinging to each other amidst the tempest, threatening to destroy everything they had built together. Dylan felt his mother's body tremble against his, each suppressed sob sending waves of pain through his own chest, reminding him that he wasn't the sole bearer of familial burdens. She's with the doctors now, Dylan, Carmen managed to say between choked sobs, her voice hoarse from weeping. They said the blood tests revealed something concerning. They need to run further tests. Just then, the examination room door swung open, revealing the familiar figure of Dr. Emily Wang, the pediatric oncologist who had been Sophia's caregiver for 2 years, a woman of Asian descent in her 50s, whose gentle eyes had guided the family through the darkest moments of their initial treatment. Dr. Wang, clad in the pristine white coat that Dylan associated with both hope and dread, approached with the measured gait of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. Her expression grave, tightened Dylan's stomach in anticipation. In her hands, a folder held the results, information no father would wish to hear about his child. Dylan noted her avoidance of direct eye contact, a telltale sign he'd learned to recognize, and his legs trembled slightly as he braced for the impending impact. Through the doorway, he glimpsed Sophia, lying on the examination table, appearing even smaller and more fragile than usual, tethered to monitors flashing incomprehensible numbers and graphs that clearly worried the professionals surrounding her. Family Williams, we need to discuss Sophia's test results, Dr. Wang said, her professional voice masking the compassion Dylan sensed beneath. Unfortunately, the figures indicate we must act swiftly to adjust her treatment. The ensuing conversation was a whirlwind of complex medical terminology, alarming figures, and stark realities that transformed the hospital corridor into a courtroom where Sophia's fate was being decided by forces beyond their control. Dr. Wang explained that Sophia's latest blood work revealed clear signs of leukemia resistance to the current treatment protocol, a complication, while not uncommon, demanding an immediate and aggressive shift in therapeutic approach to avert a potentially fatal disease progression. Dylan absorbed each word as if they were bullets fired at his soul, understanding that the precarious stability they'd achieved in recent months was a fragile illusion, shattered entirely. The doctor mentioned figures like $30,000 for the new chemotherapy cycle, experimental medications priced in the stratosphere, and extended hospitalizations requiring full insurance coverage. Dylan felt the world spin as he realized he had lost precisely what Sophia needed most during this critical juncture in her battle with cancer. Carmen gripped her son's arm with a desperate strength, her fingernails digging into his skin through his wet shirt, as if she could transfer some of the despair consuming her. Dr. Wang, how much time do we have to start this new treatment? Dylan asked, his voice weaker than intended. And what is the exact total cost we're facing to save my sister? The doctor's response was an even more devastating blow. The new treatment protocol needed to begin within 24 to 48 hours to be effective, and the total cost could easily reach $50,000 in the next 6 months, figures that could only be covered by a robust corporate health plan like the one Dylan had so foolishly and ironically lost. The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on any member of the family. At the precise moment Sophia most needed intensive medical care, they had lost the sole means of affording it, a perverse coincidence that seemed orchestrated by some malevolent force of the universe. Dylan felt a wave of nausea rising in his throat as he mentally calculated the mathematical impossibility of their situation. Even if he could secure another job immediately, no company would provide coverage for a pre-existing condition as severe as Sophia's leukemia, and individual plans were financially inaccessible for a family already living on the brink of survival. Dr. Wang continued explaining the technical details of the treatment, but her words became background noise as Dylan struggled against the panic, threatening to completely consume his ability to reason and make rational decisions. Unfortunately, without adequate coverage, we will have to explore other financing options, the doctor said, carefully avoiding mentioning the transfer to the public system directly. There are assistance programs, but the process could take weeks to be approved. It was in this moment of utter despair that a nurse approached the family with a look of professional embarrassment, carrying a folder containing documents that clearly held additional bad news for a family already being crushed by the weight of one crisis after another. Jennifer Morrison, a seasoned oncology nurse in her early 40s, with fiery red hair pulled back in a practical bun, had worked long enough in the pediatric oncology ward to recognize the look on families' faces just before their worst nightmares began. She approached the Williams family with the hesitant gait of someone about to deliver the final blow to those already prostrate, her hands clutching the documents as if she could somehow hide them forever. Dylan noticed the reluctance etched on her face and instantly knew more devastating news was imminent, though he couldn't fathom how the situation could possibly worsen from the past few hours. The nurse nervously shifted her gaze between Dylan and Carmen, clearly searching for the most tactful way to convey information she knew would be devastating for a family already grappling with a simultaneous medical and financial crisis. "Mr. Williams," the nurse began, her voice betraying her reluctance, "I need to inform you of a matter regarding your health insurance. I received a notification from the system that your plan was canceled today, just 2 hours after your termination." The revelation struck Dylan like a bolt of lightning in a clear sky, not for the information itself, which he had anticipated, but for the unnerving speed with which Brooks had processed his severance, a brutal efficiency that revealed a level of malice extending far beyond the mere application of corporate rules. Corporate health plans typically included waiting periods for cancellation, especially in cases of termination, but Brooks had clearly accelerated the process with deliberate, vindictive intent, ensuring that Dylan and his family would suffer the maximum consequences for his insubordination. The nurse explained that, according to information received from the Jordan Brand Human Resources Department, the cancellation had been processed as termination for cause, a classification that eliminated any protections or transitional periods that might have given the family a few weeks to regroup. A cold fury began to simmer in Dylan's chest, a novel and dangerous emotion he'd never experienced before, directed specifically at Daniel Brooks and his calculated cruelty, which now directly threatened the life of an innocent child. Carmen's weeping intensified upon hearing the official confirmation that they had lost not only their family income, but also the sole medical coverage keeping Sophia alive. Her tears fell like drops of pure despair onto the cold hospital floor. "The insurance company has given you 24 hours to confirm an alternative payment method," the nurse continued, loathing each word she uttered. "Otherwise, we will have to place Sophia on the public health system's waiting list." The dreadful import of these words hung heavy in the air, a virtual death sentence, for everyone present understood that the public system's waiting list for specialized oncology treatments stretched into months, not days. Sophia had no time to spare. Dylan's legs finally buckled, forcing him to lean against the corridor wall to prevent a complete collapse. The brutal reality of the situation finally pierced through the shock and adrenaline that had sustained him until that moment. He glanced through the ajar examination room door and saw Sophia peacefully sleeping, connected to monitors, her breath rising and falling in a tranquil rhythm, starkly contrasting with the chaos unfolding around her. A fierce resolve blossomed in his chest. Regardless of the necessary actions, the laws to be broken, or the dignity to be sacrificed, he would not allow his little sister to perish due to his own folly and Daniel Brooks's cruelty. The nurse lingered, offering information about assistance programs and financing options, all of which were patently inadequate for the urgency of the situation, before discreetly departing to allow the family time to process the magnitude of the crisis. "Mom, I'll handle this," Dylan declared, a resolve that surprised even himself as he wiped away his mother's tears. "No matter what, Sophia will receive the treatment she needs." In a desperate act bordering on madness, Dylan decided to directly contact Daniel Brooks, fully aware that it would be humiliating and likely futile, but needing to attempt anything that might reverse the catastrophic situation his family faced. Dylan stepped away from Carmen in the examination area, heading to a more secluded section of the hospital where he could make the call without his mother overhearing the conversation he knew would be devastating. His fingers trembled as he dialed the number he'd memorized over the 3 weeks he'd worked at Jordan Brand. The phone rang several times before Brooks's familiar, hateful voice answered, laced with the supreme satisfaction of someone who knew exactly who was calling and why. A cruel satisfaction that made it clear he'd been anticipating this call, preparing to savor every moment of supplication and humiliation that was about to unfold. Dylan swallowed his pride and anger, forcing his voice to remain calm and respectful, though each word cost him a piece of his dignity, for he knew Sophia's life depended on his ability to persuade a ruthless man to demonstrate a mercy he clearly did not possess. "Mr. Brooks, this is Dylan Williams," he began, his voice controlled, masking the absolute despair he felt. "I'm calling to implore you to reconsider my dismissal. My sister is in the hospital and needs the health plan." The laughter that erupted from the other end of the line was a sound Dylan would never forget, a cruel, genuinely mirthful cackle that revealed the sadistic pleasure Brooks derived from absolute power over the fate of a desperate family. "You should have considered your little sister before playing hero, boy," Brooks said, his voice dripping with pure venom and malicious satisfaction. "And lucky for you, I fired you when I did, because we discovered $500 missing from the till today. What an interesting coincidence, don't you think?" The accusation struck Dylan like a gunshot, not only for the obvious injustice of the claim, but for the sudden realization that Brooks wasn't simply being cruel for cruelty's sake, but was actively constructing a criminal case against him, transforming his dismissal into something far more sinister and perilous. Dylan tried to protest, to explain that there were witnesses to him assisting Jordan when the money supposedly vanished, but Brooks cut him off with another cruel laugh, explaining that the security cameras had mysteriously stopped functioning during precisely the period in question. A coincidence so convenient it would be comical if it weren't so horrifying. "You've not just lost your job, boy," Brooks said, savoring each word like a predator relishing its prey. "You might as well have just bought a one-way ticket to jail." The call ended with Brooks hanging up on Dylan, leaving him alone in the hospital corridor with the devastating realization that he had not only lost the sole means of saving Sophia, but was also being actively framed for a crime he hadn't committed. A conspiracy so insidious and elaborate it exposed a level of malevolence he hadn't known existed in the real world. Dylan stood there for several minutes, the phone still in his hand, processing the magnitude of the impending disaster, a perfect storm of injustice, cruelty, and bad luck seemingly designed specifically to destroy everything he loved. The bitter irony of the situation did not escape him. In a moment of genuine kindness, attempting to help a man he admired, he had inadvertently created the conditions for his sister's possible death and his own incarceration. A cruel lesson about the perils of trying to do the right thing in a world that punished decency and rewarded ruthlessness. He rejoined his mother, finding her in hushed conversation with Dr. Wang, both looking his way with expressions of concern that made it clear their telephone conversation had not gone unnoticed, though they could not have heard the precise details of the humiliation and threats he'd just endured. "The conversation didn't go well, did it?" Carmen inquired, reading the defeated expression on her son's face. "Dylan, what else did that dreadful man tell you?" The ensuing hours passed in a haze of hospital procedures, hushed conversations between doctors and nurses, and desperate attempts to find alternative funding sources, all of which were acknowledged as inadequate to the urgency of Sophia's situation. Dylan remained by his sister's bedside throughout the afternoon and night, watching her chest rise and fall with the quiet breath of a child oblivious to the fact that her life hung by a financial thread. Her innocence painfully contrasting with the cruel complexities of the adult world threatening to consume her. Carmen had finally succumbed to exhaustion, sleeping in a chair across the bed, her face still bearing the marks of dried tears and the strain of a day that had transformed hope into utter despair. Sophia had briefly awakened during the afternoon, smiling at Dylan with her usual innocent joy, asking when she could return home and if he could bring her favorite storybooks. Questions that cut him to the core, because he knew that perhaps he could never again provide her with the simple things that brought her happiness. Dylan held his sister's small, frail hand, their fingers intertwined, silently promising to find a way to save her, even if it meant sacrificing everything he possessed, including his own freedom. "I'll take care of you, Sophia," he whispered to the sleeping girl, his tears falling onto the hospital sheet. "No matter what happens to me, you'll be all right." It was precisely 2 o'clock in the morning when Dylan's phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number, a time so unusual that he initially considered ignoring it, assuming it was some sort of prank call or automated sales pitch that had somehow obtained his personal number. But something about the call's persistence, the way the phone continued vibrating even after he declined the first ring, prompted him to finally answer, more out of curiosity than any real expectation that it could be anything significant or helpful. The voice on the other end was undeniably familiar, although Dylan initially thought he was dreaming or hallucinating due to the stress and lack of sleep of the past 24 hours. "Dylan, this is Michael Jordan," said the deep, distinctive voice he had heard only hours before, but now seeming to emanate from another universe, from a time when his life still held meaning and his actions had logical and just consequences. "You saved me today and you have no idea how much. We need to talk urgently." The words sounded too surreal to be true, an impossible fantasy born of despair and exhaustion, but the specificity of the details and the genuine urgency in Jordan's voice convinced Dylan that, in some incomprehensible way, the most powerful man at Jordan Brand was calling him in the middle of the night. "Mr. Jordan? How did you get my number?" Dylan asked, struggling to believe he was having this conversation. "Why are you calling me after everything that happened today?" Dylan left the hospital at 2:30 a.m., walking the deserted streets of Chicago toward the 24-hour cafe Michael Jordan had mentioned during the surreal phone call, his footsteps echoing against the wet asphalt as he tried to process the improbability of what was about to unfold. The city slept around him, with only the flickering streetlights and a few traffic signals piercing the void, creating an almost cinematic backdrop for a rendezvous that felt more like a movie scene than a reality, a devastating reality. He had left Carmen sleeping beside Sophia, whispering an excuse about needing to go out to take care of some things, neglecting to mention that he was about to secretly meet with the most powerful man in the Jordan Brand at a 24-hour cafe in the middle of the night. The cold night air cut through his still damp dress shirt from the previous morning's rain, making him shiver as he walked. But the physical chill was nothing compared to the tempest of emotions churning in his chest. Each step took him further from the hospital, where his sister battled against time, but also closer to a conversation that could represent the only remaining glimmer of hope for his shattered family. What could Michael Jordan want with me after everything that happened? He pondered as he rounded the corner. Does he know about Brooks's accusations, or will this make my situation even worse? The Luna Cafe was a modest establishment, functioning around the clock to serve the night shift workers in the area's hospitals and police stations, with its worn formica tables and plastic red chairs that had seen better days, yet offering a warm and inviting refuge for lost souls in the Chicago night. Dylan pushed open the glass door, the bell above the entrance chiming softly, and immediately spotted Michael Jordan seated alone at a back table, still wearing the elegant black overcoat from earlier, but now with a grave and focused expression that contrasted with the unassuming atmosphere of the place. Jordan lifted his eyes when Dylan entered, and for a moment the two men simply regarded each other across the nearly empty cafe, a moment pregnant with tension and possibilities, suspended in time. The only other patron was a visibly exhausted nurse, sipping coffee at a table near the window, eyes heavy with sleep as he flipped through a medical journal, oblivious to the drama unfolding just feet away. Jordan gestured for Dylan to approach, and the young man walked slowly to the table, his sneakers making soft, rhythmic sounds against the worn linoleum floor, feeling as if he were walking toward his destiny, whatever that might be. "Sit down, Dylan," Jordan said, his voice low and carrying a natural authority, yet also a surprising gentleness. "We need to discuss matters far exceeding what transpired this morning." Dylan settled into the red plastic chair opposite Jordan, hands trembling slightly as he rested them on the table, still unable to fully grasp that he was there, in this surreal moment, face to face with a man who embodied everything he aspired to be in terms of success and resolve. Jordan ordered 2 coffees for the drowsy waitress behind the counter, a woman in her 50s who clearly recognized who he was, but with professional decorum, maintained discretion regarding the presence of a celebrity in her modest establishment. The silence between them stretched, tense and protracted, Jordan scrutinizing Dylan's face as if evaluating his character, seeking signs of honesty and integrity to confirm the initial impression he'd formed during the morning's incident. Dylan, in turn, tried to decipher Jordan's serious expression, searching for clues about what had prompted this impossible call, this clandestine meeting that could completely alter the course of his life. When the coffees arrived, served in simple white mugs that starkly contrasted with the usual elegance of Jordan's world, the older man finally broke the silence with a revelation that underscored the intricacy of Dylan's situation beyond his initial comprehension. "Dylan, you must understand that the documents you saved today were not ordinary meeting papers," Jordan began, his voice low but imbued with intensity. The revelation struck Dylan like a shockwave, instantly illuminating why Jordan had reacted with such gratitude when he saved the papers, and why Brooks had appeared so furious at their interaction, as if layers of conspiracy and conflict had lain hidden beneath the morning's chaos. Jordan continued, explaining that he'd uncovered evidence of fraudulent contracts signed in the Jordan brand's name, systematic misappropriation of funds meant for charity programs benefiting underprivileged schools, and a sophisticated scheme of exploitation involving high-ranking employees preying on vulnerable communities. The documents Dylan had salvaged contained forged contract photographs, records of suspicious bank transfers, and emails that unequivocally proved the complicity of numerous company insiders in criminal activities that tarnished the reputation Jordan had painstakingly built over decades. The young man listened in growing silence, realizing he'd inadvertently become entangled in a much larger war between forces of good and evil within the Jordan brand. A battle where his impulsive act of aid had seemingly placed him on the righteous side, yet also squarely in the center of a perilous conflict. Jordan revealed that he'd been quietly collaborating with federal investigators and specialized legal counsel, meticulously constructing a robust case that could lead to arrests and the recovery of millions of dollars stolen from communities desperately in need. Had these papers been lost today, Dylan, years of meticulous investigation would have vanished down the drain, Jordan stated, his eyes flashing with an intensity reminiscent of his legendary court performances. "You didn't just help me, you saved the integrity of everything I believe in and have fought for my entire life." Dylan experienced a complex mix of relief and terror upon comprehending that his action had not only been morally correct, but also crucial to something far grander than he could have imagined, though it also meant he'd unwittingly placed himself in the crosshairs of dangerous individuals willing to do anything to protect their criminal enterprises. He finally mustered the courage to tell Jordan about Sophia's desperate plight, the theft accusation leveled by Brooks, and the insidious plot that threatened not only to destroy his life, but also to condemn his sister to death through a lack of essential medical care. Jordan listened intently, his expression growing progressively darker as Dylan unveiled the details of Brooks's calculated vengeance, a retribution that transcended a simple dismissal and manifested as a deliberate criminal pursuit. When Dylan mentioned Sophia's leukemia and the urgent need for $30,000 in treatment, Jordan's fist clenched on the table, his knuckles whitening with the force of his grip, a visceral reaction that revealed a profound emotional connection to the young man's plight. The ensuing silence thrummed with raw emotion, Jordan clearly grappling with the painful memories Dylan's words had evoked. "Dylan, I've worked for decades with organizations supporting children with cancer," Jordan finally said, his voice tinged with a vulnerability few had ever witnessed. "I know exactly what you're going through, the feeling of powerlessness, the constant fear, the race against time." Jordan's philanthropic commitment bridged an immediate understanding between the two men, transforming what could have been a mere business conversation into a deeply human moment of connection between two souls dedicated to children's well-being. Jordan explained that he had donated millions to organizations like the Make-A-Wish Foundation, becoming the organization's largest individual donor in history, and that through these experiences he had witnessed hundreds of families facing battles similar to Dylan's, an exposure that had rendered each case profoundly personal. Dylan felt tears burning in his eyes as Jordan shared stories of the courageous children he had met over the years, of the sense of responsibility he felt when seeing desperate families battling the system, and of the unyielding resolve required to continue helping when the suffering seemed more than anyone should bear. The connection forged in that moment transcended any social class or economic disparity, uniting two men through the universal experience of paternal love and the fear of losing a cherished one. Jordan reached across the table and placed his hand on Dylan's, a simple gesture laden with meaning, communicating more than words could about his unwavering resolve to intervene. "No one should have to choose between doing the right thing and saving a child's life," Jordan stated, his voice firm with renewed determination. "We will find a way to resolve this, Dylan. I promise I won't let Sophia suffer because of Brooks's cruelty." It was in this burgeoning moment of hope that Jordan received a call that utterly transformed the atmosphere of their conversation, morphing a moment of connection and potential redemption into a desperate race against time, threatening to obliterate any chance of justice. Jordan's phone vibrated insistently, and as he looked at the screen, Dylan observed his expression immediately shift to profound concern, the lines around his eyes deepening as he answered with the urgency of someone recognizing a critical connection. The conversation was brief but clearly alarming, with Jordan firing rapid-fire questions in a low voice and receiving responses that visibly paled him beneath the fluorescent lights of the cafe. Dylan watched Jordan's body language morph from relaxed to tense, his shoulders stiffening and his jaw clenching as he processed information clearly representing bad news for both of them. When Jordan finally hung up, he looked at Dylan with an expression blending anger, frustration, and genuine urgency, as if about to deliver news that would change everything once again. The young man felt his stomach clench in anticipation, instinctively knowing that any call capable of leaving Michael Jordan visibly shaken had to portend serious trouble for him. "Dylan, that was my personal attorney," Jordan said, his voice fraught with urgency and contained frustration. "Brooks not only filed a formal complaint against you for theft, but he accelerated the entire process. The ensuing explanation was like witnessing a nightmare unfold in real time, with Jordan revealing that Brooks had leveraged his connections within the corporate security department to pressure for immediate police action, transforming what would normally be a slow internal investigation into a lightning-fast criminal pursuit. Jordan's attorney discovered that the security cameras at the cash register had been mysteriously deactivated during precisely the period Dylan assisted Jordan, a coincidence so convenient as to unequivocally demonstrate the malicious premeditation behind the frame-up. Even more disturbing was Brooks's success in convincing investigators that Dylan posed a flight risk due to his family's desperate financial situation, ensuring any arrest warrant would be executed with top priority. Jordan explained that even his considerable influence had limits when it came to interfering in active criminal investigations, especially when formal procedures had already been initiated through the proper channels. The cruel irony of the situation was not lost on either man. Dylan was being pursued for a fabricated crime precisely because of his honesty in helping Jordan, creating a scenario where the victim became the accused and the true criminal manipulated the justice system for his own malevolent purposes. Even I cannot interfere in an ongoing criminal investigation, Dylan, Jordan said, his frustration palpable in his voice. But there's something else you need to know, and you need to know it now. The conversation reached its apex when Jordan, looking directly into Dylan's eyes, delivered news that transformed an already dire situation into a literal race against time. A revelation that made the young man understand his next few hours could determine not only his own fate, but also Sophia's. "Corporate police will arrest you this morning," Jordan stated, each word laden with the weight of an unavoidable sentence. "Brooks accelerated the process so they would be at the hospital looking for you within 6 hours. The realization that he had only until dawn before being dragged away from Sophia at the most critical juncture of her medical life struck Dylan like a physical blow, making him understand he was trapped in a perfect snare where every move he made could be used against him. Jordan continued, explaining that Brooks had meticulously calculated the timing to maximize psychological distress, ensuring Dylan would be apprehended in front of Sophia and Carmen, transforming what was already a medical tragedy into an additional trauma for a family already suffering beyond any reasonable human limit. The 24-hour cafe, moments before seeming a safe haven for an important conversation, now became the stage for an earth-shattering revelation, a place where hope and despair engaged in a macabre dance that would define the future of all involved. "You have 6 hours before they arrive at the hospital, Dylan," Jordan repeated, meeting the young man's gaze directly. "6 hours to decide if you'll run or face this head-on, knowing your choice will affect not only you, but Sophia as well." Dylan returned to the hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning, his legs leaden with exhaustion after the devastating revelation that he had only 1 hour before the investigators arrived. The weight of his conversation with Jordan still echoed in his mind as he walked the silent corridors toward the room where Sophia lay, connected to monitors flickering gently in the dim light. He settled carefully into the chair beside his sister's bed, observing her serene and innocent face, unburdened by the unfolding drama around her. Her golden curls scattered across the hospital pillow like an angelic halo, a cruel contrast to the grim reality awaiting them. Carmen had fallen asleep again in the chair on the other side of the bed, exhausted by the previous day's emotional turmoil, her uneven breathing revealing that even in slumber, true peace eluded her. Dylan gently took Sophia's small, fragile hand, his fingers intertwining with hers as he whispered silent promises that, no matter what transpired in the following hours, he would find a way to protect her and ensure she received the treatment she desperately needed. The bitter irony of being about to be apprehended precisely when Sophia required him most did not escape him, but he forced himself to maintain an outward calm even as his mind frantically searched for alternatives that simply did not exist. "I will do everything right, Sophia, even if it means sacrificing my own freedom," he mused, softly stroking his sister's hand. "You cannot pay the price for my honesty, not when your life hangs in the balance." Precisely at 6 o'clock in the morning, as the first rays of sunlight began filtering through the hospital windows, Dylan heard the unmistakable sound of firm, determined footsteps echoing down the hallway, accompanied by the metallic clatter of equipment that could only signify one thing: the arrival of the investigators Jordan had alerted them about in the early hours. Two men in dark suits, their identification badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights, entered the room, followed by a hospital security officer clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but obligated to accompany them due to protocol. The lead investigator, a tall, slender man in his 40s, with cold, calculating eyes, consulted a file in his hands before approaching the bed where Sophia still slept, oblivious to the fact that her life was about to be turned upside down once more. Dylan felt his heart pound as he saw Sophia stir, her eyes slowly opening to meet the strangers in her room, an innocent confusion spreading across her face as she attempted to comprehend why so many serious figures were present so early in the morning. Carmen awoke abruptly to the commotion, her eyes immediately locking onto the investigators with the protective instinct of a mother guarding her offspring. though she did not fully grasp the unfolding events. "Dylan Williams, you are under arrest for grand larceny," the lead investigator stated, his voice cold and professional, echoing through the room like a death sentence. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The ensuing scene was something that would haunt Dylan for the rest of his life. A public humiliation that transformed what should have been a moment of familial healing into a traumatic nightmare that would affect not only him, but also the people he loved most in the world. The cold metal restraints clamped around his wrists with a definitive click that seemed to reverberate throughout the hospital wing as other patients and their families observed through slightly ajar doors, their eyes filled with morbid curiosity and silent judgment of the young man being dragged away like a common criminal. Sophia, moments before peacefully awakening, began to scream with an intensity that sliced through Dylan's heart like a razor, her small fists pounding against the hospital bed's railings as she desperately tried to reach her brother being taken away by strangers. "Dylan! Dylan! Don't take my brother!" she cried, her tears falling onto the hospital sheet as Carmen desperately tried to comfort her own tears mingling with her daughter's in a display of despair that even the most seasoned investigators momentarily faltered at. Sophia's panic attack was immediate and intense, her monitors beginning to blare alarms as her breathing became erratic and her skin grew pale, forcing nurses to rush into the room to administer sedatives to calm her before the stress caused serious medical complications. "No, don't take my brother. He didn't do anything wrong," Sophia wailed between sobs, her voice echoing through the hospital corridors. "Dylan, come back to me. I need you here with me." Dylan's journey to the police station was a blur of familiar streets that now seemed to belong to another world, a universe where he was still an honest working young man, instead of a suspected criminal being transported in the back of a marked police vehicle, his hands cuffed behind his back as he watched Chicago flash by through the armored car's window. Chicago's Central Precinct was a towering red brick edifice, a silent witness to decades of human drama, its corridors echoing with tales of injustice and redemption, guilt and innocence, lives shattered and destinies sealed by decisions often bearing little relation to the actual truth. Dylan was processed through the system with the mechanical efficiency of a well-oiled machine, his fingerprints taken, photographs snapped from both the front and profile, his personal belongings cataloged and stowed in a plastic bag, to be returned only upon resolution of his legal predicament. The interrogation room to which he was led was a claustrophobic space, its gray walls stark against a metal table and two uncomfortable chairs, illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights that created an atmosphere of despair seemingly engineered to break the will of suspects and coerce confessions for crimes they may never have committed. The investigator leading his interrogation was the same man who had arrested him at the hospital, now accompanied by a younger female investigator carrying several folders, brimming with evidence purportedly proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. "Mr. Williams, we have substantial evidence against you," the investigator stated, opening a folder on the metal table. "It would be far simpler for all of us if you simply confessed and spared us the protracted ordeal of a trial." The presentation of the evidence against Dylan was a masterpiece of manipulation and fabrication, revealing the sophistication of the plot orchestrated by Brooks, a conspiracy so meticulously crafted and convincing that even Dylan, knowing his own innocence, momentarily doubted his ability to prove the truth. The investigators presented security footage clearly showing Dylan abandoning his position at the Jordan Brand reception desk, but the footage had been so expertly edited as to completely remove the context of his actions, obliterating any indication that Michael Jordan had slipped and needed assistance, thereby portraying Dylan's departure as an arbitrary abandonment of his post. Even more devastating was the evidence of the stolen money, $500 in bills that had been discovered, hidden in his personal locker in the employee locker room, money that was obviously planted by Brooks or his accomplices, but now served as tangible proof of his alleged guilt. Investigators explained that the absence of footage from the crucial period was being treated as a coincidental technical failure, a convenient explanation that eliminated any possibility of using the cameras to prove his innocence. Dylan listened to each accusation with mounting despair, realizing he was trapped in a web of lies so meticulously constructed that the truth seemed impossible to establish through the conventional legal avenues available to him. "The evidence is clear, Dylan," said the younger investigator, spreading photographs of the found money across the table. "You abandoned your post, the money vanished and was found in your personal locker." It was during this moment of apparent total defeat that Dylan glimpsed a possible light at the end of the tunnel, a sudden memory that could represent his sole chance of escaping the meticulously crafted frame Brooks had built around him. He recalled seeing Maria Gonzalez, the night cleaner who worked at Jordan Brand during the early morning hours, pushing her cleaning cart through the corridors precisely at the time he was assisting Jordan in collecting the scattered documents. Maria was a woman in her 50s who had silently worked for the company for over a decade, an almost invisible presence who cleaned the offices while executives and employees slept at home, but whose very invisibility might have allowed her to witness exactly what had happened without Brooks noticing her. Dylan hesitantly mentioned the possibility of this witness to the investigators, hoping they would at least consider the possibility that there was another side to the story that needed to be heard before his life was ruined by false accusations. The investigators exchanged skeptical glances, clearly doubting that a cleaning lady could provide any relevant information in a case they considered already closed, but agreed to contact her for a formal deposition, more to fulfill legal procedures than any genuine expectation that it would alter the case's outcome. Dylan felt a spark of renewed hope ignite within him, knowing Maria was an honest, hard-working individual who wouldn't hesitate to tell the truth if directly questioned about what she had witnessed. "There is a witness who can corroborate what truly transpired," Dylan stated, his voice imbued with renewed hope. "Maria Gonzalez, the night custodian, was present when it all unfolded and saw that I was assisting Mr. Jordan." When Maria finally arrived at the precinct 2 hours later, escorted by another investigator who had located her in her small apartment in an immigrant neighborhood on Chicago's periphery, Dylan immediately sensed something terribly amiss with the woman who might be his salvation. Maria Gonzalez was a small, frail woman with gray hair pulled back in a simple bun and hands weathered by decades of hard work. But in that moment, she appeared terrified beyond anything Dylan had ever witnessed, her eyes darting nervously around the room like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. She avoided direct eye contact with Dylan, her hands visibly trembling as she settled into the chair the investigators offered, her entire body language communicating a profound fear that transcended the normal nervousness of someone giving testimony in a police station. When the investigators began asking basic questions about her identity and her work at Jordan Brand, Maria responded in such a low voice that they repeatedly had to ask her to speak louder, her monosyllabic answers revealing that she was battling some external pressure that prevented her from speaking freely. Dylan watched with growing concern as the woman who represented his sole chance of rescue clearly struggled between her desire to tell the truth and a terrifying fear that kept her silent, an internal battle being waged right before his eyes. When they finally asked directly if she had witnessed the previous morning's events, Maria looked directly at Dylan for the first time, her eyes filled with tears and a profound sadness that conveyed more than words could express about the impossible position she found herself in. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary," Maria finally said, her voice cracking with the obvious lie. "I was busy cleaning the upstairs. I didn't pay attention to what was happening in the reception area." Dylan's heart sank as he realized Maria was deliberately lying, not out of malice or a desire to harm him, but out of fear of something or someone that had managed to silence her more effectively than any legal threat could. During a break in the interrogation, as investigators momentarily left the room to check some bureaucratic details, Dylan managed to whisper to Maria, desperately asking why she wasn't telling the truth when they both knew she had witnessed everything that had happened the previous morning. The tears streaming down Maria's face as she finally found the courage to respond revealed the depth of terror Brooks had instilled in her through threats that extended far beyond her own personal safety. "He said he'll call immigration if I talk," Maria whispered, her voice filled with utter despair. "My entire family will be deported. My grandchildren who were born here will lose everything they know. I can't risk that, Dylan, even knowing you're innocent." The revelation struck Dylan like a thunderbolt. making him realize that Brooks had calculated his revenge with a cruelty that transcended himself, threatening an innocent immigrant worker's family to ensure the sole witness to his innocence remained silenced. The realization that his situation was intertwined with the suffering of other innocent people created a moral dilemma that cut deeper than any threat to his own freedom. "Brooks threatened to deport my whole family if I testified, Dylan," Maria whispered, tears tracing paths down her face. "I can't sacrifice my grandchildren for you, even knowing you're innocent." It was in that devastating moment of understanding that Dylan made the decision that shocked everyone in the room. A choice that demonstrated the type of character and moral integrity that had led him to help Jordan in the first place, even knowing that it meant sacrificing his only real chance of escaping the fabricated accusations against him. As the investigators returned and began to pressure Maria to provide specific details about what she had witnessed, Dylan abruptly interrupted, his voice clear and firm, echoing through the interrogation room with a resolve that surprised even the most seasoned officers. "I don't want Maria to testify," he stated, looking directly into the investigator's eyes. "She can't risk her family for me. I prefer to face the consequences alone rather than be responsible for the destruction of innocent people." The ensuing silence was absolute, each person in the room grappling with the magnitude of Dylan's deliberate sacrifice, relinquishing his strongest defense to shield a family he barely knew, yet whose suffering he couldn't bear in conscience. The public defender assigned to his case, a weary man in his 60s who had seen hundreds of similar cases throughout his career, was visibly distraught by Dylan's decision, instantly comprehending the devastating legal ramifications of foregoing the sole witness who could establish his innocence. Maria looked at Dylan with a mixture of gratitude and horror, realizing he was sacrificing his own freedom to protect her family, an act of selfless compassion that made his predicament all the more agonizing. "Without that witness, you're looking at 5 years," the public defender pleaded, his voice laced with disbelief. "Dylan, you're making a choice that will obliterate your life to protect people you barely know." Dylan remained in the interrogation room for 2 more hours after his decision to protect Maria, signing a series of legal documents formalizing his refusal to accept the testimony of the only person who could prove his innocence. Each signature representing another step towards a 5-year prison sentence he was choosing to accept on behalf of a family of immigrants he scarcely knew. The public defender continued to implore him to reconsider, repeatedly outlining the ruinous implications of his choice, but Dylan remained steadfast in his resolve, knowing he couldn't live with himself if his freedom cost Maria's deportation and the devastation of her family. The investigators processed the papers with the clinical efficiency of professionals who had seen countless similar cases, though occasional glances of incredulity exchanged between them underscored the inexplicable choice of this young man to sacrifice his own life to protect a stranger. The interrogation room seemed to shrink with each passing minute, the gray walls closing in around him like a psychological prison, mirroring the physical one awaiting him, while the scratching of the pen against the paper echoed like a countdown to the end of his freedom. Dylan thought of Sophia, lying in the hospital, needing $30,000 in treatment, and the cruel irony of choosing imprisonment precisely when she needed him free to fight for her life. "Every signature I put here is another step further from Sophia, but I can't destroy Maria's family," Dylan thought, watching the ink dry on the paper. "I hope Michael Jordan has a plan, because I just ran out of options." Meanwhile, across town, Michael Jordan strode through the elegant corridors of Jordan Brand headquarters with a resolve his employees rarely witnessed, his erect posture and decisive steps communicating an urgency that made secretaries and executives instinctively clear the path. He carried a discreet leather briefcase, discreetly equipped with a state-of-the-art recording device, supplied by his lawyers through a warrant obtained in the early hours of the morning, explaining to a federal judge the urgent need to document evidence of corruption that threatened to derail a months-long investigation and condemn an innocent young man. Jordan had spent the night working with a team of corporate crime specialists, developing a meticulously calibrated strategy to have Brooks confess to his crimes without raising suspicion about their true intentions. The timing was absolutely critical. Dylan was scheduled for transfer to prison within hours, and once he entered the penal system, reversing his situation, even with evidence of his innocence, would become exponentially more difficult. Jordan knew he had only one chance to execute his plan, and any error or hesitation could result in the permanent destruction of a young man's life who had demonstrated more moral integrity during a crisis than many executives displayed in entire careers. "This is the moment of truth," Jordan murmured, adjusting the briefcase containing the equipment. "If I can get Brooks to confess, I can save Dylan and expose this entire corruption." Jordan's approach to Brooks's office was calculated to appear casual, greeting employees with a neutral expression. He found Brooks in his glass office, a cold, calculating space that perfectly mirrored his personality. Brooks was reviewing reports on the Dylan Williams case, a smug satisfaction lighting up his face, a sadistic pleasure evident in the meticulously crafted destruction of the young man's life. Upon seeing Jordan, he swiftly donned a professional mask, though his eyes betrayed a malicious glee. Jordan entered with assured confidence, closing the door to establish the necessary intimacy for their crucial conversation. "Mr. Jordan, what an honor to have you here," Brooks said, rising with a false smile. "I presume you are here to discuss the unfortunate case of young Dylan Williams." Jordan sat with measured movements, positioning his briefcase so that the recording device captured the conversation clearly. "Brooks, we need to resolve this Dylan situation internally," he began, adopting a tone of corporate concern. "The Jordan brand can compensate for any damage the company has sustained." "Precisely. What was the damage?" The question was phrased with surgical precision, designed to sound like a legitimate inquiry into financial losses, while in reality it was a trap to elicit details of Brooks's criminal scheme. Jordan meticulously observed the reaction, noting how the man's eyes lit up with the prospect of profiting further from his cruelty. "Well, Mr. Jordan, the situation was more complex than it appeared," Brooks said, growing increasingly confident. "We had to take extraordinary measures to protect the company's interests." The confession began slowly but quickly escalated into a torrent of incriminating details as Brooks's greed and arrogance overwhelmed any caution. He proudly recounted how he had discovered the theft of $500, though in reality he had planted the money in Dylan's locker overnight, leveraging his authority to access restricted areas. Brooks detailed how he coordinated with technicians to mysteriously disable the cameras during the crucial period, ensuring there was no record of Dylan's assistance to Jordan. The artist, brimming with satisfaction, described his masterpiece, revealing how he personally edited the footage to remove any context that might exonerate Dylan. Jordan maintained a neutral expression, posing questions that elicited further incriminating details. "The boy truly thought he could play the hero without consequence," Brooks cackled cruelly. "I had to be creative with the evidence, but the outcome justifies the methods." As Jordan extracted every detail of the confession, recording evidence that would both exonerate Dylan and expose greater corruption, the situation at the precinct rapidly deteriorated. Dylan had just signed documents and was being prepared for transfer, his civilian clothes replaced by the orange uniform that marked his transformation from free citizen to inmate. The process was humiliating, with guards treating him with detached, mechanical indifference. During this preparation, Carmen arrived in a state of utter panic, her clothes disheveled and eyes red-rimmed, carrying devastating news. She had raced through the hospital corridors and Chicago streets like a possessed woman, driven by the terror of seeing Sophia deteriorating while Dylan was being destroyed. "Dylan, where is my son?" Carmen shrieked at the counter, her voice choked with despair. "Sophia had another crisis. She needs to start treatment immediately, or she may not survive." The news struck Dylan like a physical blow, making him realize that he would lose not only his freedom, but possibly Sophia as well. Carmen managed a few minutes to speak through the bars, her hands trembling as she held his. "The doctors say Sophia has a maximum of 24 hours to begin the new treatment," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They're talking palliative care if we can't secure the money by tomorrow." The brutal irony was inescapable. At the very moment Sophia needed help most, Dylan was being taken to a place where he would be unable to fight for her. Dylan squeezed his mother's hand through the bars, attempting to convey strength he didn't feel, promising to find a way to help even from prison. "Mom, you need to be strong for Sophia now," Dylan said, forcing firmness into his voice. I will find a way to resolve this, even from prison. The transfer moment arrived with unrelenting precision, guards arriving to escort Dylan to the van that would take him to county jail. Dylan walked the corridors in shackles, each step echoing like a funeral march for his former life. The transport van sat in the loading dock area, a menacing, armored vehicle that had carried thousands from the free world into the prison system. Dylan was positioned in the back, restraints connected to a waist chain, the cold metal serving as a stark reminder of how drastically his life had changed. He could hear Carmen weeping outside, sobs slicing through the air like lamentations. It was in this moment of utter defeat, as the doors were about to close and Dylan mentally accepted the end of his freedom, that the detective received a call that would change everything. "Stop everything! Stop everything now!" The detective roared, rushing toward the van with the phone clutched in his hand. "Dude, you're not going to believe what just happened." The detective sprinted to the van, the phone still clutched, his expression morphing from bureaucratic routine to absolute shock as he processed the information he'd received. "Dylan Williams, you're free!" he shouted, his words echoing through the precinct's loading dock like an impossible miracle. "We just received evidence proving your complete innocence." The shackles were removed from Dylan with the same swiftness they were applied, the cold metal finally releasing his wrists as he struggled to process the sudden reversal, transforming defeat into victory. Jordan had arrived at the precinct minutes earlier, carrying the recording that documented every word of Brooks's confession, evidence so devastating that investigators immediately issued arrest warrants for the true criminal. Carmen rushed to embrace her son, her tears now of relief instead of despair, as Dylan held his mother close, still reeling from the speed of his fortune's turnaround. "My son is free! My son is free!" Carmen repeated between happy sobs. "Now we can save Sophia together, as a family should." The revelation of evidence against Brooks was devastating and complete, with Jordan's recording documenting not only the frame-up of Dylan, but also a network of corruption that extended far beyond a singular case of personal vendetta. Brooks was arrested in his own office, handcuffed in front of shocked colleagues who witnessed the sudden fall of the man who for years had terrorized employees with his calculated cruelty. The accusations against him encompassed fabricated evidence, criminal defamation, corporate corruption, and witness intimidation, offenses that could have resulted in decades of imprisonment for someone who thought themselves above the law. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Dylan signed papers formalizing his complete release, all charges permanently expunged from his record. His criminal history wiped clean, as if the nightmare had never occurred. Jordan observed the entire process with quiet satisfaction, knowing he had fulfilled his promise to protect the young man who had salvaged his investigation through a simple act of human kindness. "Justice has finally prevailed, Dylan," Jordan said, firmly shaking the young man's hand. "But this is only the beginning of how we will resolve your family's situation." What followed surpassed Dylan's wildest dreams of how his situation could be rectified, transforming a legal victory into a complete life transformation that would address not only his immediate needs but also his long-term aspirations. Jordan revealed that he had secured immediate payment for Sophia's entire oncology treatment, ensuring she received the best available medical care without any financial burden on the family. Even more extraordinary was the plan Jordan had devised for Dylan's future: a full scholarship to Northwestern University, enabling him to pursue his educational dreams, coupled with a position at the newly established Dylan Williams Integrity Foundation, which Jordan was creating specifically to protect honest young employees from situations similar to Dylan's. The foundation would be funded by the recovered $2 million stolen funds that Dylan's saving investigation had made possible, creating a perfect cycle where his initial act of kindness would result in protection for hundreds of other young professionals in the future. "This foundation will bear your name because you embody everything I believe in," explained Jordan. "Integrity, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice for others, even when no one is watching, proved pivotal." The subsequent transformations, unfolding over the following months, were as dramatic as they had seemed improbable just hours prior. Each member of the Williams family found not only respite from their immediate struggles, but genuine opportunities for growth and success. Sophia responded remarkably well to the new oncology treatment, blood work consistently showing improvement that prompted physicians to revise her prognosis from guarded to excellent, with realistic expectations of a complete remission within a year. Carmen secured a position as administrative coordinator for the Dylan Williams Integrity Foundation, a role that not only provided financial stability for the family, but also allowed her to leverage her life experience to assist other working families navigating similar crises. Maria Gonzalez gained full legal protection from any immigration retribution, along with assistance initiating the citizenship process, ensuring her family would never again live in fear of deportation due to the threats of ruthless supervisors. Dylan became a national symbol of integrity, his story recounted on television programs and in magazine articles as a testament to the enduring value of doing the right thing, even when the immediate consequences appear devastating. I never imagined that protecting Maria would result in protecting hundreds of others, Dylan reflected. Sometimes the best decisions are those made with the heart, not the head. 6 months later, at the official launch event for the Dylan Williams Integrity Foundation, held in the elegant event hall of the Jordan Brand headquarters, Dylan was unrecognizable from the desperate young man who had been handcuffed months prior. Dressed in a tailored suit and speaking with assured confidence to an audience of executives, journalists, and community leaders, he had transformed from victim to advocate for a cause transcending his personal experience. Jordan ascended the stage to deliver the announcement that would complete Dylan's remarkable turnaround, revealing that the investigation into the corruption that Dylan had helped expose resulted in the recovery of $2 million stolen from social programs intended for underprivileged schools. This money would now permanently fund the foundation, ensuring that honest young workers always had protection from abusive supervisors and corporate injustices. The culmination arrived when Jordan presented Dylan with a sealed envelope, explaining it contained a proposal for him to lead the entire social responsibility area of the Jordan brand after his graduation. Character is revealed when no one is watching, but it's truly shown when everyone is, Jordan stated. Your choice to protect Maria, even risking imprisonment, showed me exactly who you are. Dylan held the envelope with steady hands, finally understanding that his decision to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything, had planted seeds that grew far beyond anything he could have imagined. Sophia sat in the audience, her golden curls gleaming under the hall's lights, completely healed and radiant, applauding her brother who had risked everything to protect strangers, and in the process, discovered that true wealth comes not from what one earns, but from what one is willing to sacrifice for others. The foundation bearing his name would protect future generations of young workers, transforming his personal experience of injustice into a permanent force for good in the world. Chicago's autumn sun filtered through the panoramic windows of the Jordan brand's 25th floor headquarters, bathing Dylan Williams' office in a golden light that seemed to perfectly symbolize the extraordinary transformation his life had undergone in the past 5 years. At 22, he sat behind a polished mahogany desk as the company's director of social responsibility, a position created specifically for him after his magna cum laude graduation in business administration from Northwestern University. His office walls were adorned not with trophies or diplomas, but with photographs of families the Dylan Williams Integrity Foundation had assisted, smiling faces of young workers who had found protection from abusive supervisors, and handwritten letters from children whose medical treatments had been funded by the organization bearing his name. Framed in exquisite mahogany, a first edition of the Chicago Tribune hung on the main wall, a testament to his story 5 years prior. Its headline, "Young Hero Turns Injustice into Hope for Thousands," served as a constant reminder for Dylan during moments of reflection. He recalled how unimaginable it had seemed on that harrowing hospital day when all hope seemed lost, that he would one day occupy one of Chicago's most prestigious offices, managing a $15 million annual budget dedicated to assisting families facing circumstances mirroring his own. His capable secretary, Lisa, gently knocked before entering with a stack of reports detailing the foundation's latest projects. "Dylan, the September figures are in," she said, placing the documents on his desk with a smile reflecting the genuine pride the entire team felt for their work. "This month we assisted 347 families with medical emergencies, 23 young workers facing corporate harassment, and funded full scholarships for 56 students from disadvantaged communities. The numbers were impressive, yet Dylan knew that behind each statistic lay a genuine human story. A family rescued from despair. A youth granted a second chance at life. The phone on his desk rang with the personalized chime reserved for Michael Jordan's calls, a sound that always quickened his heart. Not with anxiety, but with profound gratitude for the man who had profoundly transformed his life. "Dylan, my boy, you free for lunch today?" Jordan's voice carried the same paternal warmth that had developed over the years. "I have a surprise for you, and I'd like to discuss expansion plans for the Foundation's West Coast outreach." The relationship between the two men had transcended the mentor-mentee dynamic, evolving into a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values regarding the importance of leveraging success to uplift others. Jordan had become a father figure to Dylan, offering guidance not just on business, but on life, relationships, and the responsibility that came with the power to positively influence the world. After confirming lunch, Dylan rose and walked to the window, surveying the bustling Chicago streets below, the same city that had been the stage for both his greatest nightmare and his greatest redemption. He could see the Children's Memorial Hospital in the distance, where Sophia had battled leukemia and now worked as a volunteer every Saturday, telling stories to children undergoing treatment and offering families the hope she herself had received during her darkest days. Sophia, now 13, had blossomed into a remarkable young woman, her experience with illness having sculpted within her a compassion and maturity that astonished everyone who knew her. She frequently accompanied Dylan to foundation events, sharing her story with moved audiences and demonstrating that miracles can occur when good people unite to make a difference. Carmen had flourished in her role as the foundation's operations coordinator, employing her life experience and intimate understanding of the hardships faced by working families to develop increasingly effective assistance programs. She had become a respected figure in Chicago's social services community, frequently invited to lecture at conferences on how organizations can provide genuine and dignified aid to families in crisis. The most remarkable transformation in Carmen, however, was her renewed confidence, the way she carried her head high, knowing that her struggles and suffering had resulted in something greater than she could ever have imagined. Maria Gonzalez had become a U.S. citizen 2 years prior, in an emotional ceremony where Dylan served as one of her character witnesses, and now worked as a cleaning supervisor at the Jordan brand headquarters, a position that afforded her not only financial security, but also the respect and recognition she deserved after decades of honest and dedicated work. Her grandchildren, whom she had feared losing to deportation, now attended excellent public schools and spoke proudly of their grandmother, who helped save a hero. Maria's story had become part of a larger narrative about how protecting the vulnerable creates waves of kindness that ripple far beyond the original intentions. Daniel Brooks, conversely, had been sentenced to 15 years in prison on multiple counts of corruption, evidence tampering, and extortion. A verdict that sent a stark message throughout the corporate world regarding the repercussions of abusing power against honest employees. His downfall had been as dramatic as his cruelty had been systematic, and the investigation into his crimes uncovered a network of corruption that resulted in the imprisonment of other executives and the recovery of over $10 million stolen from social programs. Dylan often pondered how Brooks's choice to pursue cruel vengeance had, ironically, led to the complete exposure of his crimes and the creation of systems that would safeguard thousands from similar fates. When Dylan arrived at the upscale restaurant where he'd meet Jordan for lunch, he found not only his mentor, but a table filled with familiar faces: Carmen and Sophia, Maria and her grandchildren, Dr. Emily Wang, who had cared for Sophia, and even some of the Foundation's earliest beneficiaries who had traveled to Chicago specifically for this surprise gathering. Jordan rose with a radiant smile as Dylan approached, extending a sleek envelope clearly containing something of significant import. "Dylan, 5 years ago, you saved some papers from vanishing down the drain," Jordan said, his voice brimming with emotion. "Today, I want to give you something that represents everything that has grown from that moment of kindness." The envelope contained legal documents formalizing the transfer of 50% ownership of the Dylan Williams Integrity Foundation directly to Dylan, making him not just a director, but a co-owner of the organization that had blossomed into one of the nation's most respected social service foundations. Even more extraordinary was the second set of documents detailing Jordan's plans to replicate the foundation's model in 15 more American cities, creating a national network of protection for honest young workers and families facing medical crises. You've proven that doing the right thing, even when it costs everything, is always worthwhile, Jordan said, embracing Dylan as a father might embrace a son. Now, I want you to help disseminate this lesson throughout the nation. As Dylan surveyed the table, witnessing the beaming faces of all those whose lives had been positively impacted by that rainy morning 5 years prior, he finally grasped the profound truth Jordan had been endeavoring to impart from the outset, that true wealth is not measured by accumulation, but by the willingness to give, and that a single act of kindness, however seemingly insignificant at the time, can blossom into world-altering transformations that surpass human comprehension. If Michael Jordan and Dylan Williams' journey resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and discover the next compelling narrative we've crafted for you. See you soon. And before you go, comment on where you're watching from and tell me, what did you think of the resolution to this story?